Good to go? Oh, thank you. Okay. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are in a dimly lit room, but we want to make sure everybody's good and awake. Good morning. My name is Monica Palmer. I'm with the Strategic Growth Council. I want to welcome you all to our LA AHSC workshop on the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. We are webcasting this session today, which is why you see this really cool mic here. And this session, I think, will be available on our website after this. Is that right, Coral? Yeah. Okay. Great. And so for folks on the web, thank you for joining us as well. So we're here to talk again about Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program, or AHSC program. We released a Notice of Funding Availability, or a NOFA, last week on Monday, the October 2nd, for $255 million for this third round of the program, which we're really, really excited about. We also, in partnership, the Department of Housing and Community Development, who we partner with on this program, also released a NOFA for the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program. Want to make sure that's on folks' radar. We'll talk a little bit about that throughout the day, but there's also $50 million available through the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program. So there's a lot of really exciting opportunities for transit-oriented development and the key infrastructure that we need to get that done. So that's what we're here to talk about. I'm going to go quick through the agenda. Sorry. Am I doing this wrong? Sorry.
I don't know. Maybe it's frozen.
Is it frozen? Because even the thing doesn't work? Sorry, y'all. I'm just going to do this up.
We can keep on talking.
Okay. I have to look at the agenda. So the agenda, you all have the agenda in front of you. We don't have a lot of printed materials today. We did try to save the trees because the PowerPoint today is over 100 slides. So we have everything available for you online, and we will point out where you can find everything online. And the PowerPoint is posted online as well. So if you need to reference that, it is already posted there. But for today, a quick show of hands just to start off. Who here is interested in applying to the program this year and plans to apply this year? All right, a lot of potential applicants. That's great. Who here has applied before? All right, some experienced folks. Who here is it your first time coming to a workshop about AHSC? All right, some newer folks. Okay, so a good mix. So we are going to start the day. You can see in your agenda we're going to run quickly through kind of the program overview, goals, some of the background, and then we're going to dive pretty deep into the scoring criteria, our threshold requirements, a variety of things that you should look out for if you're planning to apply. Is that great? Aha. There we go. And also, the PowerPoint is online, and we apologize. The slides are going to be a little cut off today, but they are online for your reference. So we'll try to talk through everything and make sure you have all the info. Anyways, where I was, we're going to talk through scoring criteria, key topics, thresholds. Key topics are things that maybe give people headaches, some things that we want to walk through to make sure you have a good understanding of some key things that we'll be looking at. And then we're going to go through and actually walk you through the application. So we've totally redesigned the application for this year. We're really, really excited about it. And we'll give you a pretty thorough walkthrough of what that looks like. We'll take a quick break. We'll go through also the greenhouse gas quantification methodology that you need to use for this program. We'll give you an overview of that and then walk you through how the review process will go. So that is the plan for today. In terms of questions, so we're going to try to keep the day going, maybe even get you out of here before noon, which hopefully everybody would be excited about. So we're going to ask folks to hold your questions during the presentation, and what we'll do is after each of these segments, we'll take questions from the audience. I believe we will use this mic here. We'll probably set it up here, and we'll ask you to come down and ask your question at the microphone so the webcast gets all the audio. So we'll be very civilized about that. So yeah, so please hold your questions till the end of the sections, and we'll open it up for questions. And we also ask that you keep your questions general to clarifying questions about the guidelines and the program. For questions about your personal project that you might have, we're going to have a question and answer session kind of breakout at the end that you're more than welcome to ask any more specific questions about your project. And we also have individual appointments available this afternoon. So many of you are signed up for these consultations later this afternoon. If at the end of the workshop, if you want to check in with Ulysses at the front table to confirm your workshop, your appointment, excuse me, and confirm the location, that would be really great. We will be, sorry, am I doing anything wrong? Okay, we will be, oh perfect, that's better. We will be across the street at City Hall for those appointments, so do not come back here after lunch. We will be at City Hall in 3 different rooms, and again, Ulysses will let you know where you need to go. I think that is everything that I was supposed to start with. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague Dov Caden from Strategic Growth Council to get us started.
All right, thanks Monica. Hi everyone, happy to be here. So I wanted to start us off by taking a little bit of a step back here and looking at the big picture. I think it's sometimes important to frame our program through the lens of the problems that we're trying to solve. And in the context of climate change, we have a car problem in this state. This is a graph showing greenhouse gas emissions by source in California. I know you can't quite see the sources there, but transportation is the largest source by far on the far left there, with passenger vehicles making up the majority of that blue bar. What's more, this share really hasn't actually been getting better recently. Many of the other sectors are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while GHGs from surface transportation have flattened and actually even increased in recent years. And this is despite the fact that cars are getting more and more efficient, right? Higher miles per gallon recently, more zero-emission vehicles on the road. So how do we have increasing GHGs from transportation if our cars are getting more efficient? Well, people are driving more, and they're driving longer distances. So this is the vehicle miles traveled problem, or VMT. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that acronym. And the critical question is why people are driving more. And while there's obviously a lot of things at play here, 2 of the most important reasons are, number 1, we have this lack of location-efficient housing in this state, and particularly affordable housing. So for a lot of Californians, there's this spatial mismatch between where we work and where we live and where we play. So that's a land use issue. And then the second thing that's going on is that there's this lack of quality low carbon transportation options. So even for those folks that are living in location efficient areas in urban cores, there might not be viable alternatives that allow them to make the decision to take something else besides a car. So at its core, the AHSC program is really focused on trying to make a dent in those 2 shortages. We use cap and trade dollars to fund infill projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled through sustainable land use, housing, and transportation practices. AHSC projects accomplish this reduction in VMT by creating that location-efficient housing that I was just speaking about, and actually sort of building the infrastructure to support that mode shift from vehicles to those low-carbon transportation options like walking, cycling, and transit. So at the end of the day, we're trying to help create more affordable communities that allow you to drive less. That's essentially our mission statement. This grant brings together the affordable housing and the transportation worlds. We certainly understand that's easier said than done, but we really truly believe that can help to build capacity and facilitate that future collaboration down the line. So eligible applicants for this program include a whole host of public agencies, really at all scales of government, but then also housing developers, school districts, and as of this round, federally recognized Indian tribes as well. In terms of what we actually fund, AHSC funds both capital projects as well as programs. Capital projects typically include an affordable housing development, or an AHD. We're going to be using these acronyms throughout the presentation, so I apologize for all the acronym soup here. But the AHD is the only portion that we administer as a loan. The rest are administered as grants. And the affordable housing loan is really what helps to pay for the actual housing construction. AHSC also funds housing-related infrastructure, or HRI, and those are any costs that are associated with the housing construction that are required as a condition of approval, as a part of sort of a locality's development review process. Sustainable transportation infrastructure, or STI, is the next bucket, and that would include capital improvements that directly result in that mode shift from vehicles to low-carbon transportation options. So these are things like bike lanes, new sidewalks, new transit vehicles, new transit infrastructure even. And then transportation-related amenities, or TRA, are things that provide supportive amenities to cyclists, pedestrians, and transit riders. So these are things like bike parking or urban greening, bus shelters, things that make those STI improvements more comfortable, essentially. In addition, AHSC can fund a variety of programs. In the past, these have been things like shared mobility programs, educational programs, transit subsidy programs as well. So there are three potential project types in this program: transit-oriented development, or TOD, integrated connectivity projects, or ICP, and rural innovation project areas, or RIPA. And the type of project area that you'll have for your project is largely dependent upon the existing transit around which your project is built. So if you have a transit stop that has 15-minute headways and some permanent infrastructure like a dedicated lane, we would consider it high-quality transit. And without getting too far into the specifics here, TOD projects are in more urban settings and already have that high-quality transit. ICP projects are maybe slightly less urban and don't have the high-quality transit yet. And then RIPA projects are essentially ICP projects that are less dense and in more rural settings. We do have funding targets for each of these project types, which I'll speak about later, but this really helps to sort of spread our funds throughout the state because you're only competing with projects that are within your bracket. So you don't have an LA Metro TOD project that's competing with a rural project in the Central Valley. So in addition to the funding targets I just mentioned, we do have some statutory set-asides in our enabling legislation that require at least 50% of our funding to go towards affordable housing and 50% to go towards projects located in and benefiting disadvantaged communities. And that is a term that is defined by a tool called Cal EnviroScreen, which we won't really go into today, but we can talk about later if you'd like. And these set-asides are not mutually exclusive, as you can see, so you can have projects that satisfy both of those. I really like to use this graphic because I think it helps us to demonstrate the breadth of the program. Yes, AHSC projects will usually have an affordable housing component. And some of my colleagues at HCD like to remind us, affordable housing is in the title of the program. We certainly get that, but part of what makes this a unique program is that it forces applicants to look at their projects as more than just one component, and as more of an ecosystem. So housing developments, they're not just isolated projects. They're integrated with their surrounding communities, so we try to promote projects that provide not just that housing, but also the new transportation options, right, and those amenities that support those options. So in this way, we're really trying to fund projects that create places. So we're going to skip the San Francisco project because we're in LA today. So jumping now into some project examples that we funded from the first two funding cycles. This first one is the Path Metro Via's TOD project right here in LA. This was a permanent supportive project with really good density near high quality transit, which is really a recipe for success in our program. You can see on the bottom right there the funding asks that are broken down by component. You'll see that for all of our project examples. This should give you sort of a taste of what sort of asks people have. So on this one, it looks like 12 of the $13 million was towards the affordable housing developments, so very housing heavy on this one. Our projects have to be at least $1 million and up to $20 million for their AHSC ask, not including the leverage. But you see a lot of variance within those boundaries depending on the specific context of the project. So this is the Reading Downtown Loop and Affordable ICP project. This was a mixed income 70% affordable project in downtown Reading core that really reshapes their downtown mall, and we're hoping it's going to act as a catalyst for downtown development there. This was one of our biggest project awards at $20 million, and it's a great example of a small city really sort of leading the application charge and being competitive. Another interesting aspect of this project was their emphasis on the transportation components. So as you can see, a majority actually of their funding ask was for sustainable transportation infrastructure and transportation-related amenities, which really sort of made their project pretty compelling. Those components included protected bike lanes, some new transit fleets, curb extensions for larger sidewalks, really a robust transportation project. I also wanted to make sure we highlight a rural project. So this is Lindsay Village. It's a 49-unit project primarily for farm workers in the Central Valley. It incorporates CalVan's van pool service, which really demonstrates the evolution of AHSC. This was something that we funded as a standalone project in the first round, and now it's sort of being incorporated into housing projects, which is great. So I think Coral is going to come up and talk us through some of our thresholds.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming today. So I'm going to kind of just jump into the thresholds, some of the changes that we made this year, but I did want to kind of give a quick overview and point out some of the general themes of our thresholds. There are several that address readiness, basically. What we're trying to get at is that projects should be pretty much shovel ready. So we require CEQA and NEPA clearance, discretionary land use approvals, site control, financial feasibility of the project. And a lot of the reason around this is that we're part of the climate investment programs, and we have a statutory mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a set period of time. So we need to make sure that the projects that we invest in kind of get up off the ground and start to see those greenhouse gas emissions reductions sooner rather than later. And another part of our thresholds are that we have a couple key project elements. Every project is required to have a transit station or stop identified. And in the case that there's an affordable housing development, it has to be within a half mile of that housing development. And then it has to further demonstrate a reduction in vehicle miles traveled, as Dob was talking about earlier. So that brings us to transit passes. We're now requiring transit passes instead of letting them be an optional program, as was done in the past. And the specific requirement around this is that you have to have at least one pass per restricted unit for at least 3 years. And this pass should be able to cover an entire commute, so that's a minimum of 40 commute length rides per month. So that can be in the form of an unlimited free pass, a discounted pass, or a reloadable transit card. And for discounted passes, at least 50% has to be paid for by the grant. So that's our bare minimum. But I know it's a little hard to read up there, but you are rewarded in the scoring for the quantification methodology dealing with greenhouse gas reductions for providing a larger subsidy than that 50% minimum. So it's incentivized in other ways. We're also now requiring an urban greening component to our project, to each project. So we wanted to point out that this is 2 urban greening features per project, so your overall AHSC design, not 2 per project component. We know there was some confusion around that, so I just wanted to clarify. Is everything okay? Oh, thank you. Wow. Okay, this is new technology. So we have a whole list in our appendix of options available for urban greening. We tried to provide some flexibility so that people could design their urban greening features around their specific projects. So we have things like green alleys, community gardens, greenscape pedestrian and bicycle trail systems. You can pick from that whole menu for what you need for your project. And how much, we want it to be enough to be impactful. So I know this is kind of squishy language, but we want it to be not like a single tree over a bus stop, but a block of street trees, for example. So when you're looking at it, look in terms of kind of benefit to the community or the project area you're working in. And again, we recognize that this depends on what other components your project is proposing. A really key piece of this threshold is that it has to be in a publicly accessible space in the project area. So you can't have it like on the inside of a housing development that the public can't access. It has to be where anyone in the project area or the public at large can access. We're also requiring adequate lighting, and the intention of this threshold is pretty much just to address public safety and get people to use transit and active transportation more. But we're actually not requiring anything more than what's already required by law. So you just have to meet local, state, and federal standards. Local jurisdictions should have guidance on this. If there's any issue with that, there's a couple resources we've linked to in the presentation here that you can find online for a little more guidance. But again, look to your local jurisdiction for their requirements. So we also want to acknowledge this is going to be a context-sensitive issue if your project is in a residential area versus a downtown area like where we are here. It's going to have different lighting requirements. So it is very specific to each individual project. And then I did want to point out it's kind of indirectly, lighting is indirectly scored in our active transportation improvement section. So I know you can't see all of this, but the definition for safe and accessible walkways says attributes which contribute to comfort and safety, including but not limited to adequate lighting or shade canopy. So in a roundabout way, it's also incentivized in our quantitative policy scoring section, which we'll get into soon. Okay, so we now have an enforceable funding commitment threshold that is the same as last year, actually, and that is that you basically have to get 90% of development costs together, including your AHSC asks, in order to be eligible for the program. So you can calculate that using this equation. Your funds requested plus outside money that you've gotten for the project, minus any deferred costs, over the total development costs minus any deferred costs. And we did want to point out that there's a little confusion because the definition of enforceable funding commitments includes the AHSC funds requested. This was just an oversight. Basically, we want to be clear that the funds requested doesn't get to count twice in this equation. There's also now a requirement that at least 20% of the residential units in your affordable housing development have to be restricted affordable units. We're going to take questions at the end of the section, sorry. And that has to have an average affordability of no greater than 50%, represented by the area median income, and that's for specifically restricted units. So to calculate that, you can take the total number of units, multiply it by each affordability level you're at, and divide it by the total number of restricted units. So we have an example here. You have 10 units at 40% AMI, you multiply that out, you get 400, 10 units at 60% AMI, multiply that out, you get 600, add it together, you get 1,000, divided by 20 total units, and you get to an average affordability level of 50%. So our program is really focused on creating dense urban centers, and kind of the flip side of that is that we don't want to allow for or promote growth at the boundaries and have sprawl development patterns being funded by AHSC. So we have a requirement that the project must not result in a loss or conversion of agricultural or working lands. And to verify this, you can use the Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program tool developed by the Department of Conservation. It has come to our attention that this tool is sometimes not totally accurate. So if it's the case that you have a site that you want to develop and the FMMP tool says it's ag land and you know it's not, we've created an exception for infill projects. And we can kind of talk you through that definition if it's an issue to make sure you qualify under this threshold. And just a couple other things. We have added that sustainable transportation infrastructure and transportation-related amenities components of your AHSC project have until the time of initial grant disbursement to demonstrate all environmental clearances. This is not the same for any affordable housing developments and related housing-related infrastructure. And then we also are requiring that projects show alignment with their sustainable community strategy for their region. And to ensure this, you can get a letter of support from your metropolitan planning organization. You don't have to have consistency in the legal sense of that. It just has to be kind of in the same vein, show alignment with it. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Craig Shields, to talk about the scoring criteria.
Thanks, Carl. Good morning. Round 3 introduces a simplified scoring structure focused on 3 distinct categories. Like the previous round, the GHG Quantification Methodology will represent 30 of the 100 possible points. A new category, Quantitative Policy Scoring, may include up to 55 points per application. We call this category quantitative to emphasize the quantifiable or objective nature of the criteria. Based on input from previous rounds, we redesigned the criteria and evaluations in this category to be focused on facts and not subject to interpretation. Finally, the narrative-based policy category represents the smallest number of points, and it's the applicant's opportunity to tell the story of their project in a 4-page narrative-based document. Unlike previous rounds, all scoring criteria will apply to all applications regardless of proposal components. The GHG Quantification Methodology Scoring has been changed a bit. Better alignment of CALI-MOD project settings and project area types, added new measures to better capture project reductions, bolstered measures to better capture differences between projects, and remove some redundant measures. For each project, applicants will calculate estimated reductions using the GHG Quantification Methodology, CALI-MOD, or TAC methods, depending on the project components. The total GHG reduction score will represent estimated GHG reductions calculated through the quantification methodology, and the cost efficiency of reductions will be calculated by the total amount of GHG reductions divided by the dollar amount of the requested AHSC funding in the application. The quantitative policy scoring section includes 9 policy areas that support the goals of the program, ranging from active transportation and renewable energy to anti-displacement and workforce development. Scoring for each section is based on clearly defined objective measures. Scores will be automatically calculated in the application workbook that we're going to go over in a few minutes based on the applicant responses. And that little snippet at the bottom is from the application workbooks and shows how the criteria is evaluated and scored, and the points over to the right. The active transportation improvement section is one of the 3 10-point criteria sections. It starts with context-sensitive bikeways, which consider adjacent uses of land through meaningful collaborative stakeholder involvement. A bikeway over 2 miles long will earn 3 points in that category. Identification of a grocery store, medical clinic, public school, or child care facility linked by a bikeway to the affordable housing development or transit stop will earn another point. 1 point for projects that provide a bicycle network gap closure that increases bicycle safety and access or addresses barriers to cyclists. And then the 3 sections for walkways, just 1/2 mile of a safe and accessible walkway which is continuously paved, ADA compliant, and includes that adequate lighting or shade canopy will earn another point. Identification of the grocery store, medical clinic, public school, child care facility linked by a safe and accessible walkway to the affordable housing development or transit stop for another point. And finally, 1 point for projects that provide a pedestrian network gap closure that increases safety and access and addresses other barriers to pedestrians. Our second 10-point category is green buildings and renewable energy. The total available points for energy efficiency and renewable energy has been increased to 10 points to encourage more efficient housing construction. Applicants may select from 4 energy rating systems: CalGreen, LEED, Greenpoint Rated, and Energy Star. All but Energy Star, applicants may select from 2 levels of building efficiency to earn up to 5 points. Also, up to 5 points may be awarded for projects that achieve energy grid use reductions, on-site renewable energy production that provides at least 1/3 of the required energy for the affordable housing development will earn 2 points. A zero net energy development is one that produces as much energy as it consumes over the course of a year, and that's 5 big points. The housing and transportation collaboration section is our third 10-point category. The scoring section encourages more robust, sustainable transportation and transportation-related amenities projects. Up to 6 points will be awarded for projects that request at least $1 million in their affordable housing development project and include a sustainable transportation infrastructure project budget that represents at least 25% of the AHSC request amount. Similarly, transit-related amenity projects with an AHSC project budget of at least 5% of the total award will be awarded 2 points. Projects which have received funding from another Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund project program will earn 1 point, and that GGRF funding must directly benefit the proposed project. Also, project sites within environmentally cleared high-speed rail station planning areas will earn 1 point in this category. So how accessible are those key destinations in your project area? Walkability is a measure of how friendly an area is to walking, and this round introduces the US EPA Walkability Index tool to identify walkability for the project site. Up to 3 points are available to the most walkable locations. Also, identification of a grocery store, medical clinic, public school, and licensed child care facility can earn up to 2 points, for a total of 5 points in that category. Leverage funding is another form of collaboration that earns additional points. Projects that demonstrate over 200% of enforceable funding commitments will be awarded 5 points. It's important to note, unlike the EFC threshold equation that Coral described, the calculation for funds leverage does not include the AHSC funding requested as part of the application. Programs continue to play a vital role in the creation of affordable housing and sustainable communities. Encouraging this mode shift from individual automobile dependency and to active transportation and low carbon transit is often facilitated by programs like bicycle safety training and walking school bus programs. An eligible program run by an experienced operator will earn 2.5 points. Demonstration that that program can extend beyond the funded 3-year term of the grant will earn an additional half point. While we're providing all these incredible affordable housing and mobility opportunities, we ask that applicants carefully consider potential unintended consequences on the surrounding community. Inclusion of anti-displacement strategies and affirmative marketing for disadvantaged communities will earn up to 5 points. A complete list of eligible strategies is included in the guidelines and also in the application itself. Local workforce development and hiring practices, partnerships with local workforce development, pre-apprenticeship programs, and local hiring practices can earn up to 2 points. Affordable housing developments that restrict at least 5% of the units to extremely low-income households will earn up to 5 points. Then we move on to our narrative-based policy scoring section, which is the applicant's opportunity to describe the merits of their proposal in a 4-page narrative-based format document. The round 3 guidelines establish 3 distinct areas for framing the document. Applicants are asked to describe the collaboration and planning that has shaped their proposal, including regional and local planning efforts and the collaboration between housing and transportation partners. The second section, community benefit and engagement, should describe involvement of community-based organizations and local residents in the development of this project, as well as demonstrating how this project responds to community needs. Finally, the narrative should respond to climate adaptation, describing specific climate vulnerabilities and how this proposal will address these concerns. The application workbook includes requirements for supporting documentation to be submitted with the application. To ensure consistency across reviews, the applications reviewed for narrative-based policy will be evaluated by a single interagency team of subject matter experts in the fields of greenhouse gas emission reductions, planning, public health, affordable housing, and transportation. Final scores will be based on a consensus of those team members. So we're delivering a lot of information this morning from the guidelines, the application, and the NOFA, but we have some key topics that we find are recurring topics, so we're going to go over a couple of those. Developer experience. Applicants, like prior years, must demonstrate prior experience by providing evidence of 2 projects that are similar to the proposed AHSC project in scope and size, completed by the applicant or joint applicant during the 10 years preceding the application due date. Experience will be documented in the application according to project component like AHD or HRI. The application workbook also identifies the required supporting documentation. There are similar experience requirements for transportation components. However, the sustainable transportation infrastructure and transportation-related amenities, the applicant may demonstrate required experience by using work completed by a locality transportation agency non-applicant. The application must include an executed agreement with the locality or transportation agency for that experience to qualify. The new policy was developed to help alleviate concerns related to the joint and several liability requirements. Dov is going to talk about the project area.
Okay, so project area is something that we get quite a few questions on. It certainly could be clear in the guidelines, so we wanted to just provide some guidance here today. The way that we're defining project area in this round is a 1 mile buffer around the transit station or stop, merged with a half-mile buffer around all of your sustainable transportation infrastructure improvements. And I'll walk through exactly how to do that in a second, but I did want to mention that we have developed a project area guidance document that really sort of walks through this process step by step, and it's on our website on the resources page, and it's linked here if you're looking at the PowerPoint later. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So the first step in defining your project area is to pick a primary transit stop or station. I say primary because you may find yourself in a situation where if you have a housing component, you have multiple stops that are qualifying that would meet the definition of the station or stops. You can choose which one you want to define as your primary. Then the next step would be to draw a 1 mile buffer around that primary transit stop or station. Now this is, again, the maximum area that you can draw. You can have it smaller, of course. Then the next step would be to draw a half-mile buffer around all of the STI improvements. So in this example, this is in Sacramento. I don't know how well you can see it. Yeah, okay, pretty good. The red line is a bike lane, and then the green line is some new sidewalks. So just a half-mile buffer around all of those improvements. And then the final step would be to just merge the two buffers from the second and third step. So you get this sort of oblong shape, and that would be your project area. So there are 4 possible points for which this definition of project area is relevant, and Craig talked about some of them, but I just wanted to highlight them here. The first 2 bullets are in the active transportation section, and they give you 1 point each for identifying key destinations within the project area that will be linked by walkways or bikeways. So you can see in this example, there's some of those dots there. Those are key destinations along the new bike route, so those could be counted there. And then the third bullet is in the location efficiency section, and that gives you up to 2 points for identifying existing and operational services within the project area. And those are very similar to the key destinations. So for this one, you'll see there's a dot that's way up there at the top. Even though it's not linked directly by some of those STI improvements, because it's in your project area, that could count. So net density is another one we get a lot of questions on, and it's because it's a pretty important calculation both for your minimum density requirements as well as for your GHG scoring in the quantification methodology. And we've made some important changes to the minimum density calculation as a part of this round. So the density minimums are now aligned with your project area type. So if you're a TOD project, your minimum is 30 units per acre. ICP, your minimum is 20. RIPA, your minimum is 15. If you're a mixed-use project, you can also use these minimum floor area ratios. You can choose which one you use, so either floor area or units per acre. If you've applied for this program before in the past, you know this is a dramatic improvement. It's a lot simpler than when we did the minimum densities before. The calculation itself is pretty simple as well. It's just the total number of units divided by the number of acres on the site, excluding allowed deductible areas. And the question, of course, is what counts as a deductible area? So allowed deductible areas this round are going to include public dedications of land for public streets, public sidewalks, public open space, public drainage facilities. You'll notice a theme here, they're all public. So we are really trying to emphasize things that are accessible to everyone. And so non-allowed deductible areas are going to be things like utility easements, setbacks, private drives and walkways, common areas and facilities. So those might be sort of public to the residents of your housing development, but not to the general public, so those will not be deductible. off-street parking, traditional drainage facilities exclusive to a development project, and mitigations required for development. So just a simple example here. So this is your parcel. Say you have a 100-unit project. It's 5 acres, but then you don't have any deductions. 100 divided by 5, your net density is going to be 20 units an acre. As soon as you add in some of these deductions, though, or I guess subtract these deductions, you have a public drainage facility there. Maybe you have a sidewalk that you're adding in, maybe a public park. Suddenly you're able to deduct 2 of those acres, and your net acres are now 3. 100 divided by 3, 33 units an acre. So your net density went up quite a bit there just from those deductions. So we certainly encourage you to see if you can find some of these deductions. It will improve your score. So as many of you probably have seen, we announced last week that we are including the August cap and trade auction proceeds in this NOFA, which significantly increased our amount from $155 million up to $255 million. Woo, indeed, very exciting. It obviously means that we're able to award more projects as a part of this round, which is great. Because this money is actually the first auction in the fiscal year 17-18, it also means that we have a couple new standards that are going to apply to the entire pot of money. So the first one is that there are some small changes to the GHG quantification methodology that Mario Cruz from the Air Resources Board is going to discuss later related to co-benefits. I do want to be clear that these changes are not impacting your GHG reductions, your scores, or your inputs. They're really just for reporting as of this round. But it does mean that you're going to need to use the new QM document and the new calculator, which is now posted on ARB's webpage. And Mario will get into that in a little bit more detail later. The second important note is that there are new requirements as a part of some important legislation that was passed called AB 1550. And in order to make sure that we are meeting those requirements, you're going to be asked to answer a few questions about whether your project is located in and benefiting disadvantaged or low-income communities. And these questions will be asked as part of a fillable PDF attachment, which you're going to be required to upload as a fast upload in the application. And this is actually a good segue into the application, but maybe before we do, we can take a round of clarifying questions.
So thank you for giving us some time to kind of get through the big chunk of the workshop. Because we are doing the webcast, we do ask that folks come down to the mic, get up and stretch your legs for questions. And again, anything on any of the content so far, please feel free. Don't be shy. No, you're not a shy group. All right, there we go. And I'm going to ask you guys, our folks, if you can come up to the mic to deliver your answer, that would be great. Yeah, go for it.
Real quick question. In previous HGD programs, you counted other department programs as enforceable if they're running concurrently. Are you doing that with this round by IG as well?
Sorry.
We are not counting those as enforceable funding commitments unless they have been awarded.
Little microphone dance, but it's good. It's helpful.
In the for the housing and transportation collaboration, if you have a case where you have a housing project, but the housing project itself doesn't need any AHSC dollars, all the money goes to the infrastructure. Is there a way to earn points there for housing jobs? I mean, housing and transportation collaboration.
I think that the housing transportation includes AHD and HRI. Is that correct? Like you can be doing housing related infrastructure and still count towards the housing.
But can you still earn points here? I thought one of the issues was that the affordable housing project needed to get some.
Dom, do you want to take that one? Yeah.
Yeah, so you're referring to the, like, if you have 25% of your funds that are towards the STI component. Yeah, so that would actually be in your advantage in that way because almost all of your ask would be for transportation, so you're certainly at the max of that, and so you're going to get full points on that.
Okay.
You have to have $1 million in housing ask.
You have to have $1 million.
Yeah, but what if we don't need $1 million for the housing?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
No, you have to have $1 million
I'm
for the
sorry,
housing. Yeah,
yeah.
you do.
Yes, so that could be HRI. So if you have
Exactly, that was the point.
Yeah. Yes. So even if you don't have a
I think you
loan,
should shoot that question into the box.
yeah, we can work with you on that. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll ask a question in our little workshop when we do
Individual appointment too. That'll be good. That's a good question.
Hi, thanks for doing this today. I'm seeing on the applicant instructions that you have to have completed a universal application dated September 29, 2017. If you have an AHD or HRI component.
Nice use of
So if
acronyms.
you've not completed a universal application at that point, you're eligible.
We'll go over the application next. No, it's a part of the application. It's part of the package, yeah. So you will be filling it out. Yes.
All right. Are there advantages to expand the scope of the current grant project and include additional SDI improvements?
Yeah, and maybe Dov, do you want to take this one?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
And come up here for the mic.
We have let's say we have a grant project to do the bike project.
Yeah.
And the initial scope that was submitted as part of the grant did not include sidewalk improvements, pedestrian lighting, curb extensions, ADA accessible ramps, and so on and so forth. So the question I have is the initial scope was not really complete per se. It was more of a bike project. And are there advantages to expand on the initial scope of that grant project and complement or enhance the work, the project, with additional cap and trade funding?
Yeah, I would certainly say that Craig covered a little bit the active transportation improvements scoring section, and that section includes several points for doing exactly that kind of improvements you're talking about now.
We will get extra points.
Yes, so if you go through that, I mean,
Also,
yeah.
housing and transportation collaboration if they spend more than 25%.
Right, yeah. So as Craig pointed out, if you spend more than 25% on sustainable transportation infrastructure improvements, you get points in the housing and transportation collaboration, 6
So
points.
even though, let's say the 25% is coming from the grant.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It would count for.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we can talk more specifically about sort of the projects and some of the considerations you might want to have too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? We still have a little bit of time for more questions. Don't be shy. All right. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you, team. We're going to turn it over to Evan Gorder from Department of Housing and Community Development to go through our newly redesigned application. Oh, Craig's going to start us first. Or? Sorry about that.
Evan is going to go over the application in detail. I just want to give kind of a roadmap through the process. Could I see, again, a show of hands of how many folks have applied in previous rounds? Awesome. So we're expecting some audible reactions from you as we go through this process.
Gasps.
No gasps.
No gasps.
Only good ones. So we're introducing a vastly streamlined application process. Gone are the two-phase concept and full application workbooks and the dozens of repetitive prompts that were in the FAST system. Evan is going to present the application in detail in just a minute. The application materials can all be found on HCD's website. Go to Grants and Funding, where the little red arrow is, and then select NOFAs.
You can't see it.
Oh dear.
Just
That's the page. And then after that is current NOFAs, and then, yeah, there we are. Affordable housing and sustainable communities. Okay, there. So that will link you to SGC's website for the current guidelines. Be sure you have the 2017 guidelines with the August errata date. In the event of subsequent modifications to those guidelines, updates will be posted here on SGC's website, and an email blast and listserv announcement will be made to inform applicants and stakeholders of those changes. And then be sure also to thoroughly review the NOFA, which includes the application due date, the submittal instructions, links to application materials and resources, and other contact information. There, sorry, that's the NOFA. Now the good stuff, the AHSC application workbook and applicant instructions. And then the universal application that we just mentioned, which was required for applications that include affordable housing development and housing-related infrastructure components. Other resources like HCD's loan limit tables are also included, and the loan limits begin on page 31 of that document. And like the two previous rounds, we're utilizing the FAST system for uploading our documentation and applications. Returning applicants will be able to log on with their existing username and password. New applicants will create a new password. We'll be conducting a webinar to provide more detailed instructions on the FAST system in November, but in the meantime, there are lots of good resources within FAST's website in that blue column on the left. This year, FAST will collect only very limited project data, including applicant name, description, location. HCD has developed a new tool to mine data directly from the application workbook, so all that redundant data entry that we had in previous rounds has been eliminated. There we go. Thank you. That material added up to about 18 pages in the previous round, so we're glad to be rid of it. So Evan is going to give the update on the application workbooks.
Hi, I'm Evan Gorder with HCD, and we're extremely pleased to present the Round 3 application, AHSC application. We completely redesigned the Round 3 application. We had a lot of feedback in Round 1 and 2 from our stakeholders and applicants, and we really took that into consideration and completely redesigned the application and application process for Round 3. Some of the differences you'll see in Round 2, we utilized fast uploads, fast prompts, and narratives. We had a concept workbook, and we had a full application workbook. In Round 3, we just have fast uploads, our AHSC application workbook, and our universal application workbook. We're able to kind of reduce all of these submission documents by redesigning our review process. In Round 2, we had a concept review and a full application review. Round 3, we're just having a single full application review. This also minimizes duplicate prompts. We had fast prompts and narratives in Round 2 that we eliminated in our Round 3 process. If you printed the workbooks from Round 2, they would print to over 200 pages, well over 200 pages. In Round 3, if you have all components to a project, they'll print to about 50 pages. If you have less components, they'll be much shorter than that. So we're very excited about this. Some things to keep in mind. Always begin an application by downloading the newest version from the HCD website, as Craig just showed you how to get to. You'll want to enable the macros in the Excel workbook, and you'll want to enable content each time you open that document. The layout of the AHSC application, there's an overview section, your capital projects and programs or components, and then your scoring section. There's also fast uploads laced throughout the application in the relevant prompts for that submission, that fast upload submission. You'll only want to complete the yellow shaded cells. Our applicants will input information, and all the other cells are protected. The UA is required for housing components, so if you're applying for AHD or HRI, you'll need to fill out the universal application. If you're applying for our infill infrastructure grant program, you'll need to fill out the universal application as well. That universal application will be the same if you're applying for HSC and IIG, it'll be the same universal application. So I'll save you some duplicate entry as well. Some key features of the AHSC application, we utilize colored cell references. So again, the yellowed cells, applicants will input their information. Orange cells, as you'll see an example in a little bit, are the fast uploads. So when you see orange, that'll indicate fast uploads. And then there's some in our quantitative policy scoring section. There's automatic calculations, so those cells are in blue. We also utilize, as you're going through the application and filling out prompts, this will hide and unhide worksheets and also hide and unhide rows. The fast uploads are in orange throughout the application, and a really cool feature that we utilize are the eligibility and threshold items. Most of them will turn red if you're not meeting that item, something to just keep an eye out. You don't want to submit an application with red cells. And we have redone the quantitative policy is all self-scoring. The universal application, yellow cells are cells applicants need to input. We also utilized hiding worksheets as prompts are completed, as we'll get to in a minute. This is what the cover page of the AHSC application looks like. You can't see at the bottom, but there's 5 tabs that are open when you first open the document. There's a cover page, an overview, and your 3 scoring sheets. As you fill out the application and select your components, additional worksheets will open. So this is the overview worksheet, screenshots from the overview worksheet of the AHSC application. You'll first fill out your login to FAST, get your FAST PIN number, and you'll put it on the top there in the blue arrow. This will fill out throughout the application at the top of each page, your FAST PIN. You'll also fill out your project name in the red arrow, and that will fill out the top of each page throughout the application as well. The next prompt you'll fill out is your area types. So we have TOD, ICP, and RIPA. The top in red is an example of a TOD project. You'll select TOD. This will unhide rows after row 8 on the overview tab, specifically for eligibility for TOD project areas. Below is an ICP example in blue. If you select that, again, it'll unhide your eligibility prompts for an ICP project after row 8 in the overview tab. Your next prompt, you'll fill out your capital projects and programs. Here are your components. So if you select STI as a component you're applying for, this will unhide your STI tabs that are relevant to your project. As you'll see in red at the bottom, it unhid your STI overview and your STI budget. This is pretty cool because you don't have to sift through the whole application as a whole. You'll just fill out the relevant pages specific to your project. As I discussed before, the threshold items or eligibility items, most of them will prompt red if you're not meeting that item. This is an example here. If you had selected no to this specific question, the cell would turn red, and that's an indicator that, hey, you're not meeting this item, and you'll want to revisit it and don't submit an application with red cells in it. This is our unit mix tab. This will automatically calculate your HRI grant amount based on the units you select. In this example here, we have 100 restricted units and 1 unrestricted manager unit. At the bottom, in the red is your ask for your unrestricted amount or your max amount that you would be able to request, 35,000 a unit. In yellow, you'll have your restricted amount, 50,000 per unit. That'll add up to your max amount there in blue. And you'll also want, it's the lesser of your ask and your max amount, so you'll want to go to your sources page and put like a placeholder there, just so your HRI grant amount populates correctly. Also on here, we have our affordability is auto-calculated. It'll turn red as well if you're not meeting that eligibility requirement. In this case, we have 100 restricted units at 40% AMI. We are well under our affordability restriction. This is your AHD loan amount. We have our loan limits sheets linked in the application there. Based on your AMI, your county, and your number of bedrooms, you'll fill this chart out, and this will give you your max loan amount. We also incentivize projects that are not applying for 9%, so you'll get an added boost that is added in. You can see at the top arrows is where your boost gets calculated in. For your SCI, TRA, and program overview tabs, this is how the summary page will look. We provided room for 3 activity types for each SCI, TRA program. In this example, at the top, you'll have your project name. We have example Spruce SDI here. This will go over to your budget, and the second red arrow there says Spruce STI. That's where everything will pop. It'll automatically come over. Also, in your sources, you'll want to match. The sources will pull over to your development budget here, and if your sources and your budget don't match, your uses for each source don't match, it'll highlight red, as this example does here. And so you want to make sure that those two do match. Also, real quickly, if you have more than 3 activities for a component, you'll want to, as best as you can, get it into 3, combine it into 3 here, because we have these auto calculations, and so it'll affect the application. So if you have more than 3 activity types, you'll just want to reduce that to 3. This is our quantitative policy scoring worksheet. We completely automated it. So based on your answers to the prompts, you'll automatically self-score. So you can kind of use this to run different scenarios through that you possibly want to incorporate into your project and see what kind of score that shoots out with. So it's really cool in this round. As you'll see here is an example of a fast file upload prompt in orange. You'll want to stop. It's meant to make you stop. Okay, I need to upload something into FAST, a document, and so you want to say where it says file uploaded in the yellow, you want to check yes. Okay, I went in and uploaded it into FAST. Our FAST file naming convention is a little different in round 3. We have our FAST file name just to the right. At the top, we have project area map. You'll go log into FAST. You'll want to go to submit your document. You'll have a drop-down selected of all the possible documents and the names. So you'll go down to project area map, select it, and then upload your document, and that will be how the naming convention works for round 3 and using the FAST system. This is the universal application. We got a question before, the September 29, 2017 version. This is the version. You'll find it on the AHSC, on the HCD's website for the AHSC, how Craig just showed us how to get to. You'll just want to make sure it says in red, that red arrow here, UA version 92917. That's the version you'll want to use for the AHSC and the AHSC program if you're applying for a housing component, an AHD or an HRI component. The new kind of features to this version of the universal application, if you select AHSC in your funding source for HCD in the red arrow, that will hide most of the worksheets in the document, so you won't have to sift through and figure out what do I need to fill out, what do I not. It's already done for you it'll hide the non-relevant sheets because we asked for them in the AHSC application already, so we don't want you to fill out something more than once as we have done in the past. So this really reduces the amount of work our applicants have to do. Some best practices for the application: always download the latest version of the workbook on our HCD website. You'll want to use a Windows computer to ensure all the macros function properly. And you'll always want to enable content when you're opening the workbook. Each time at the top it'll prompt you, enable content. You'll want to do that. Do as little copy and pasting as possible. If you need to copy and paste the values, sometimes that messes up the formulas that are embedded in the workbook. So you'll just want to, if you must, copy and paste the values. When filling out an application, you'll want to go to the AHSC application first, and then if you have a housing component, then go to the universal application. And we're good. I think we have some time for questions, if there are any.
All right. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.
Appreciate the good vibes from the audience. All right. Any questions for Evan on the application? And again, just a reminder, we've got the mic here so folks online can hear. Or maybe it was so self-explanatory, you have no questions. All right. Okay. So good, we're actually a little ahead of schedule, so it's 10:25 now. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So if folks could actually come back, I know on your agenda it says 10:40. If y'all can come back at 10:35, we'll kind of get through the second half of the agenda quick and get you out a little early. So 10:35 back here. Thank you. It's right. How's it going?
Good. And this is unit supplement? Yes. Okay. There was somebody that went to for this meeting.
In front, oh, is it Daniela? For TCC?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, you have one. Sorry.
I just started. Yeah, I got. We just started in my college.
We're going to go Thursday. Yeah. Are you with
Well, I'm on board of the primary thing, but I just started
oh, good to know.
so I'm working with my
Okay, perfect. I'll send you my info. Hopefully get into
yeah, so for all some of us, and people early, would you like to
oh yeah. You can also, are you in San Diego?
no, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
Like I tried to make it, but it's like 30 months.
So hard. We came down. We usually don't spend nights. We came down last night.
You have to.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of work and some warnings too. And now it's just like it was impossible. So,
Yeah, I happy to do a phone call. We'll be standing on Thursday. We get there at like 15, so if you're there a little before, happy to chat. Or no, you're not.
my colleagues are
They're going to be there. We can do a phone call with you with everybody.
you know that because leave from this work and yeah, and then there's like a microscope technology and so if you think outside the box, and make a proposal for a project that is definitely that you combine where would that be like a disadvantage?
It could be competitive. It could be interesting. You know, right now, particularly in our communities, they're very used to like, this is the way you make a product. This is what wins.
Yeah.
Different way of thinking. So I do think right now it's a little bit like these are the components you need to have. But there's ways that you can be creative. I think that it would shine through in your creative.
Yeah, because we just, you know, one of the reasons we're involved now in the urban housing sustainability resilience is because of what's going on with all the disasters, right? We don't have, you know, we need a community that just Puerto Rico. We had a shelter where you had the battery storage and all these things. So that is not, we don't want to see that. My issue is this is the boundaries that we have people then
Yes.
the transformation of people's lives.
So actually, I just want to follow up with this. We also work with and I think it's kind of new space for them as well.
Yes.
Let's turn that mic away.
Yeah, like they're creating solar.
Second.
Yes, please. Yeah, they're just kind of getting it off the ground, so it's they're learning that they go customer donation, they're going to do behavior strategies. Yeah.
No, you know, we want to sort of
yeah, but the application is going to change, and we will make a word for one.
long window.
Yeah, it's long. It's not just like yeah. So we'll go over a little bit more. So yeah.
Okay, all right, that's great.
Oh, you're working with Ray. Ray, he's a part of our program.
I know, so that's why we're he's great. And my partner is tomorrow is BLB development and energy solutions. They actually they're like, and it's just amazing. You don't know South you don't know.
Thanks.
The whole environment, you know, the doors,
All right, I'm all right. How you doing?
And the difference is that because the other thing is that they don't so if you want to reduce that,
one thing I'll mention is that so mutual housing in Sacramento. No, so they did their first farm worker housing here in the
yes.
So it's been interesting. A lot of people are listening. Let's see only one guy. Or your consumption and your production. And I'll be not on the road show next week. Yeah.
It's not a little bit.
What have you done? The TBC questions. No, I was listening. You ready? You ready? All right. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. Okay, sit down. We'll get everybody back inside. How's it going? Good. You entered in the break, but we're ahead of schedule. We're getting ready to start the PhD part. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the next part of the session so we can move through. So if folks want to take a seat, there'll be plenty of time for networking and questions at the end. So we are going to hear from Mario Cruz from the Air Resources Board. We're really grateful to have him traveling with us on these workshops. He's going to talk us through the greenhouse gas quantification methodology, or the GHG QM, more acronyms, and how you can use the various tools and calculator tool to calculate your GHG reductions for the project, for your project. Again, we'll take questions at the end of this section, and then we'll wrap up. So without further ado, take it away, Mario.
Thanks, Monica. So I'll be demonstrating how you can apply the carbon quantification methodology and calculator tool for the AHSC program by providing a walkthrough of the example project in Appendix A of the AHSC quantification methodology. As Dov mentioned earlier, the AHSC tool, calculator tool, is recently updated to include a new co-benefit summary tab to enable SGC the ability to report on key variables and air pollutant emission estimates from AHSC projects. This recent update does not impact GHG score, nor does it require any additional inputs or information. However, you will need to use this new revised AHSC tool as part of your AHSC application. So CARB is required by statute to develop methods for estimating GHG emission reductions and co-benefits from projects receiving monies from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. CARB develops quantification methodologies specific to each California Climate Investments Program. Quantification methodologies outline the process for estimating and reporting GHG emission reductions from each project type. All program quantification methodologies can be found on CARB's website at www.arb.ca.gov/auction proceeds. And it's also available on this slide. From this main site, you can visit the quantification materials page. So from this page, you can find the AHSC quantification materials under the Sustainable Communities and Clean Transportation section. Here you will find two relevant links. The first link is a PDF of the quantification methodology, which contains background and detailed instructions on the methods for estimating and reporting GHG emission reductions from AHSC projects. The second link is an Excel spreadsheet titled Revised AHSC Calculator Tool. You will need to open both links in order to complete the GHG emission reduction estimate for your AHSC project. Please review the quantification methodology in its entirety prior to completing the AHSC calculator and submitting your AHSC application. For quantification purposes, Figure 1 on page 3 of the AHSC quantification methodology displays the two approaches used to estimate GHG emission reductions from proposed projects. The example project that I'll be going through includes both a housing component and a transportation component. So we'll be using both CaliMod and the transit and connectivity methods, or TAC methods, within the AHSC calculator tool. Projects without housing components will need to use, or will not use CaliMod, and will use the TAC methods within the AHSC tool. Page 9 of the quantification methodology lists the 6 main steps to estimate and report GHG emission reductions from your proposed project if you had a housing component. Please note that you must use the most recent CaliMod version, which is 2016, which is an update from what was in the last round. Step 1 of the quantification methodology is to define the proposed project using CaliMod by completing the project characteristics and land use screens. Please refer to page 10 and 11 of the quantification methodology when using CaliMod, as many inputs have suggested criteria. One item I'd like to point out on this slide is that the project land use setting, please select RIPA or rural for RIPA projects and urban for TOD or ICP projects. Since this example project is a TOD, you'll see that urban is selected here. When completing the land use screen, please refer to Appendix B of the quantification methodology to determine the appropriate land use subtypes to select. Multiple rows may be used to characterize the proposed project. So in this example, the project is proposing to be a mixed-use housing development, so you can see both commercial and residential land use subtypes have been selected here. For projects where there is a mixture of dwelling units, such as half senior housing and half multi-family housing, you can enter that here as 2 different residential projects. However, if these units have different project characteristics, you may need to complete CaliMod more than once. Step 2 is to identify and enter the VMT reduction measures using the traffic mitigation, land use, and site enhancement screen. Please refer to Table 3 of the quantification methodology when completing this screen. I'd like to take a moment to point out an update that was made in this round, and that's to align the project settings with the project area type. That means for TOD projects, you would select urban. For ICP projects, select urban center, and for RIPA projects, select low density suburban. This example, other measures identified in this example project are increased diversity, which is only applicable to mixed-use projects, improved destination accessibility, which is applicable to projects with certain distance to central business districts. And for more information on determining that a central business district, please refer to Appendix C of the quantification methodology. Also, integrated below market rate housing and limited parking supply are shown here. For more information on reductions in parking spaces, please refer to Appendix B of the quantification methodology. For each of the VMT reduction measures selected within CaliMod, you will need to submit supporting documentation into FAS. If measures are not selected, then enter NA in the AHSC application. Please note that some measures must be within the project area, which is within half mile from the proposed housing development, which is common practice as it pertains to accessible by walking. Please note that this project area is different than the project area mentioned earlier. These measures that have to be within half mile are identified in Table 3 of the AHSC quantification methodology. Step 3 is to generate a CaliMod report using the reporting screen. You will need to select Annual and click Recalculate All Emissions and Run Report. You will need to submit the input and output files in Excel format into FAST. You will then need to complete the Excel-based AHSC calculator tool. Once the tool is open, you'll see that there's several tabs along the bottom of the window. Not all tabs will be applicable to all projects. You will begin on the README tab, which provides instructions and prompts users to enter project name, identifier, and contact information. For this example, we'll be going through the README tab, CaliMod Steps 4 through 6 tab, TAC Inputs tab, and GHG Summary tab. If you need clarification on any of the data fields, the last tab called Definitions explains each data field. You'll then need to navigate to the first applicable tab. For this example, because it's a housing component, the next applicable tab is the CaliMod Steps 4 through 6 tab. If no housing component were proposed, you navigate to the TAC Inputs tab. So this tab should be completed from top to bottom. Yellow cells indicate a user input is required, and green cells indicate user selection from a drop-down is required. As you complete this tab, you'll notice that there are inputs required from the CaliMod report, such as county, VMT, project settings, and first year of operation. All these inputs must align with CaliMod report and the AHSC application. I'd also like to point out clarification that was added in the recent update to the transit subsidy for residents measure. When determining the percent of residents eligible for subsidies, you should use one eligible resident per dwelling unit. Similar to the CaliMod measures, for each of the VMT reduction measures selected, you'll need to submit supporting documentation into FAST. These next steps are automated within the AHSC calculator. This slide shows the recent update that was made to the AHSC tool to provide key variables and air pollutant emission estimates from the housing project. Once the CaliMod Steps 4 through 6 tab is completed, you need to navigate to the next applicable tab. In this case, the TAC, because there's a transportation component, the next applicable tab is the TAC Inputs. If you didn't have a transportation component, you would go to the GHG Summary tab. You'll notice there's multiple rows in the spreadsheet. Each row corresponds to a single project type with a quantifiable GHG reduction. Please complete these rows from left to right. Similar to before, yellow cells indicate required inputs, and green cells indicate selection from drop-down menus are required. For this example, the proposed project includes a new transit bus service, so the ridership entered here represents the increase in ridership as a result of the project. If your project includes more than one project type, please repeat the process for each project type once per row. New to this round, we've added Class 4 bikeways, bike share, and capital investments that encourage mode shift as project types. This slide shows an update, that was made recently to the tool, and this shows the key variables and air pollution emission estimates from the transportation component. Again, any measures identified as part of the project must be supported by documentation and uploaded to FAST. Lastly, you need to navigate to the GHG Summary tab to enter the AHSC GGRF funds requested and the total GGRF funds requested. When finishing entering data, the GHG Summary tab will show the total GHG emission reductions from the proposed project. This slide shows the update that was made recently and shows the total key variable and air pollutant emission estimates from the proposed project. Again, the revised tool does not impact your GHG score, nor does it require any additional information. Please save an electronic copy of the Excel calculator to submit into FAST, as well as any copies of documentation used to complete the quantification methodology. So lastly, I just wanted to give a brief update as well on the project area. So as mentioned earlier, some measures are only applicable within half mile of the proposed housing development, and that's shown here by this green buffer. What we recently updated is the project area for pedestrian and bike projects to align with the project area guidance document released for the program. And that's that when determining the activity center credit to use, you can consider the project area to be up to half mile around the proposed project, with the caveat that there's additional credits for activity centers within a quarter mile of the proposed project. And this last slide shows kind of the difference between the two areas. So for GHG purposes, the project area would be that outlined in the red buffer, and activity centers within the white hashed area would not be considered towards the GHG criteria. And that completes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mario. Any questions for Mario on the GHG reduction piece? Everybody's an expert on CaliMod. Okay, good. Thank you, Mario. All right, then I think we're turning it over to Dov and Coral to wrap us up, talk a bit about the application review process and then some resources. We'll also hear from some partner entities. So, go for it.
All right, thanks. And did the clicker go away? Where is it?
Somebody hit the clicker? Okay.
So yeah, I know the QM can be sort of intimidating if you're seeing this for the first time, but I promise you it's actually not as complicated as it looks, particularly the QM PDF document that Mario was referencing. I encourage you to really just kind of go through that page by page. It'll walk you through pretty much everything. So we wanted to quickly go over the application process and just how the timing is going to work here. So as of last Monday, the application process has officially begun, now that we've released the notice of funding availability as well as the application document itself. We're going to be providing some optional one-on-one appointments with applicants after the workshops, including today. I know we're going to be meeting with a lot of you all, which we're looking forward to. And so that'll be just sort of to answer any specific questions you may have about your projects, walk through the thresholds, give some general observations on competitiveness. As we mentioned, we've done away with the concept proposal, so the next deadline is the application due date, which is going to be January 16th at 5 p.m. And then at this point, program staff will review the thresholds and conduct a readiness review. We're going to let applicants know either way if they've made it past this stage. And then for applications that do meet our thresholds, we would then review the GHG Quantification Methodology as well as the policy scoring section and send out our initial score letters. We're definitely going to provide folks with some lead time for when those initial score letters are coming, so you can kind of prepare your staff needs, because there will be an opportunity for an appeal process on that initial score letter. So yeah, we just encourage you to sort of get ready for when the letters are coming, so you can sort of prepare your staff needs accordingly. So once we finalize the scores, which we'll send out a final score letter, and we would take applications that have attained over 50% of the possible points from the GHG and the policy scoring sections. And then they would be advanced to the narrative review stage, which is the bottom one, which you can't actually see. But that stage is not appealable. And this is also the time at which we would conduct the deep dive financial feasibility assessment. So that's just to make sure that applications are financially feasible. Once this process is complete, we would then consolidate our scores and do our final ranking. And around May of next year, that's when the staff recommended awardees would be posted, and then we would go to our Strategic Growth Council for adoption in June. So as outlined in the guidelines, we have those funding targets for each of our project area types. So we're shooting for at least 35% to TOD project areas, 35% to the ICP project areas, and 10% to the rural innovation project areas. And we typically award projects with the highest scores in each project area type until those funding targets are met. However, you may have noticed that those project area funding targets I just mentioned only add up to 80%. So we do have some discretion for how we award those remaining funds. The guidelines build in this flexibility for a few reasons. The first is to sort of give our council the opportunity to emphasize some program priorities that may have gone underrepresented in those first 80%. We also have those statutory set-asides that I mentioned earlier. So 50% towards affordable housing, 50% towards disadvantaged communities. It's very likely that we would probably have already met those set-asides through the first 80% of funding, but in case we don't, we have some flexibility to meet those. Additionally, we also use these remainder funds to build in feedback from metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs. So we do this by asking MPOs to provide us with what we're calling prioritized lists of projects within their regions based on criteria that are established by the MPO themselves. But the criteria would likely revolve around essentially how well the project aligns with the MPO's sustainable community strategy and the identified land use and transportation priorities that are found within that regional plan. So once we meet the statutory set-asides, the prioritized list of projects that we receive from the MPO is really going to help to inform the remaining award selection process. So we really encourage folks to take a look at those regional plans and sort of mold your project in a way that makes it sort of aligned with those priorities. So I think Coral's going to talk about some resources now.
All right, so I know we've thrown a lot at you guys today, and the PowerPoint has been a little hard to see. So like Monica mentioned, this is going to be online also, or it already is online. But we also have more resources on our website. We have the AHSC resources page on the AHSC page of the SGC website, and that has things like the project area mapping guidance and the MPO role that Dob went over. And we also have a frequently asked questions document that we're regularly updating. We've made 2 updates since the release of the guidelines, and we're going to keep doing that throughout the entire application process. So you can keep going back to that for updates. And then if you're, I did want to mention also that we have all of our previous applications on the website as well. It's not under the resources tab, but it is, if you kind of do a little digging through our website, you can find it. And that's all the applications that have been previously submitted, those awarded and not, have all the information there. And their project descriptions, and we think it's a really useful resource for applicants who are looking to see what successful applications have submitted. So we really encourage you to use that while you're developing your projects. And then if you still have questions past that, we have an AHSC inbox, which is at, it's there, ahsc@sgc.ca.gov. And we want to make sure to kind of streamline all of our questions about the guidelines through that email. So if you can direct them all there, we can kind of assemble them and send them out to the right people and try to make sure we get a good turnaround on getting those questions answered. And then if you have QM specific questions, anything that Mario talked about earlier, you can send them to the GGRF inbox. And so that is ggrfprogram@arb.ca.gov. These are all linked to in the PowerPoint online, so if you click on it, your email will just probably pop up and compose one for you. And then to follow up again on the infill infrastructure grant, you can kind of see it at the bottom. There's a little bit there. But the NOFA has been released for that as well, and they're doing workshops for that too. So if you're interested in pursuing that as a funding source, definitely attend those. We did want to mention that although it doesn't count as an enforceable funding commitment, if you kind of budget it in and reduce your ask for HRI from AHSC, it'll increase your GHG efficiency score in the QM scoring section. So how that works is you get points for the ratio of how much money you get from the climate investment, the greenhouse gas reduction fund, versus how much greenhouse gas emissions you're reducing. So if you're asking for less money but reducing the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions, your score in that section will go up. They're also accepting questions. They have their own inbox. You can't see it on here, but it's in the PowerPoint online, so you can direct any questions about the program to them. We don't really have a lot of knowledge about the program ourselves, so we're not able to answer too many questions about that. And then I wanted to pass it off to Richard France from ELP to talk about this very cool AHSC resource that's been developed. Right.
Hi folks, I'm Richard France from Essalon Lassar Perez Advisors, and today I'm wearing my SCAG hat. Our firm is part of the TA team that is providing technical assistance statewide, but also specifically in the SCAG region. And so SCAG just wanted to let everyone here know today that they have set up an AHSC website to provide general information about the program, but helpfully it also provides a bit of a self-assessment to kind of walk you through those readiness thresholds through a guided questionnaire. And then once you've gotten through that, there are also some GHG reduction strategies, and there's another questionnaire to help walk you through the quantitative scoring process. So it's really applicable statewide, but it's something that SCAG has made available to applicants in this region to specifically help them out. And then if you're finding as you're walking through the questionnaire and you have questions, or it's saying that this is something that you might want to revisit as you're putting together your project, then it also has links to the SCAG technical assistance team. So SCAG has an inbox similar to the state where if you email them, then it'll come through and go to all of the TA team as well as SCAG staff, and so we'll figure out what resources we can connect you with to help you out. And that's it from my end.
All right. All of my colleagues are good at brevity. I can learn from them. All right. Thank you so much. So real quick, we're just going to wrap up here. First, I definitely want to acknowledge, you saw many of us presenting today, but there's quite literally dozens of other people who aren't here today, who are at HCD and ARB, who helped make this program possible. And we're also really grateful to have two other folks from HCD. We have Kim Lasoya, who's the chief of the loan closing section. We also have Terry Wright from her shop. We're really grateful for them to be able to travel with us today and be a part of the individual appointments this afternoon. So shout out to them. All right, so individual appointments. Is Ulysses in the room? No. Oh, Ulysses is right there. Okay, Ulysses, our colleague from SGC. He is your go-to for appointments. So after this, please confirm your appointment with him. He will also tell you what room you are in. So remember, we are not here. We will be at City Hall. And we're on there's going to be 3 appointments going on at the same time. And we're going to be on 3 different floors. So please remember where your appointment is, and Ulysses will let you know where your appointment is. And we haven't been over there yet, so we're not quite sure what the waiting space is. So just try to arrive maybe right before your appointment. That would be very helpful for us, so we can try to keep things on time and not crowd hallways too much. All right. I think that's most of everything. Oh, Claudia, did you want to say something real quick? Yes. Okay, go for it. Here, if you want to use the mic here, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Claudia Monterosa, and on behalf of AHSC and the City of Los Angeles, we're really happy to host you here this morning. And also, we are your housing department that is coordinating the AHSC applications for round 3. As we've done over the last 2 different rounds. So some of you, I hope, we have been collecting information from various developers since January of this year. We're about to finalize that list, and so those of you have been selected in terms of meeting the threshold criteria, competitiveness, and everything looks good to proceed to a preparation and coordination approach with the City of Los Angeles. We'll be receiving a notification from us this week. So we will be having a kickoff meeting with those developers probably next week, so be on the lookout for that. And we will also be hosting a series of AHSC clinics during the week of October 23rd. So we are in application mode process, and so we thank you so much for being here today, and we are going to be seeking your assistance throughout this whole process. So thank you. Thanks, Claudia.
It certainly takes a village for this program. Thank you. And just a reminder for other folks, we do have 2 more workshops in Southern California. We will be in Riverside tomorrow, and we will be in San Diego on Thursday. Can't remember what day of the week is. Thursday. So any other Southern California folks, we do also have more workshops. All right, so with that, we're going to close out. The last thing we're going to do here is, oops, I'm not good at the PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to have a couple of breakouts to close out the day. It'll be kind of informal networking. So we're going to have questions and experts on these items that you can go to ask questions. First, any questions around housing finance? We're going to put you in this corner here with Ms. Kim Lasoya. I'll let you not move. So if you have housing finance related questions, please come see Kim. We're grateful to have her expertise here today. If you have more questions about eligibility and threshold items, we'll stick you on this corner over here in the front seat here. We're going to have you with Craig Shields from HCD. So any questions on eligibility and threshold stuff? Greenhouse gas quantification. So we have Mario from ARB. Where'd Mario go? There, you're right there. I'm going to maybe more in the corner back this way, closer to Ulysses. So GHG quantification questions, go see Mario up that way. And then lastly, sort of general or other sort of questions, whether beginner questions. Also, if anybody is here also interested in the Transformative Climate Communities program, which is a sister program of this, you can fall under that bucket. We'll put you with our colleague Dov here in that corner over there. We might have the ability with Evan to click around the application. So folks have application questions, come see Evan. And with that, don't forget to confirm your appointment, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thanks for being here. Right. See what kind of questions you get. Hey, Morgan. How are you?
Oh my God, you have to come over. Just next time. Keep it in your mind. Elantra, yeah, I have 4 more. But we're learning all this together. We just stay together. Because you know they have all this redevelopment. And so they want us to help them execute. And but yeah, that's all ownership stuff. And this is the rental. And that, but I have 50% more than saying. People like February. Well, I'm dealing with her outside. And they see how it's performed. And so I don't mind doing it makes sense, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not. It's really too small. We waited on this one as your friend. Yeah. We'll see what happens. You know,